So my name is India Clark, and I am the Farm and Community Engagement Coordinator here at Oahu Resource Conservation and Development Council. I feel very fortunate that I get to spend a large part of my time coordinating the Hawaii Women Farmers Network. This is something that started in 2016, really with a survey, which just started to identify a growing need. And we had 120 women from all across the islands take this survey, and we just saw that there was a huge need for agribusiness tools and just for more networking, more sharing of resources, more farmer to farmer learning. And so that's a large part of what we've been doing is offering these workshops. Pre-COVID, they were on farm, and farmers learn from other farmers. So it's a lot of peer-to-peer learning. Since COVID, we've been doing more videos. So we've started Wahine Voices in Ag. If you go to our website, you'll be able to see some of those. One of the new things that we've done is create a risk management tool, and risk management is largely jargon, so we'll get to dig into it today. But basically, you put your heart and soul into the farm, and there's some simple things that you can do to just kind of help you not take on additional risk. Our jobs as farmers are very risky, from what happens in the field to the business and on the backside. So I'm really happy to have our participants today, as we're going to go over 5 steps to build your farm's legal resistance during COVID-19. I'm going to pass this over to Farm Commons. We're very fortunate to be partnering with them. Before we go, though, I do want to encourage everyone to go to our website after this, check out our risk management tool. It's also going to have a tool for regenerative ag practices. So this is kind of the full scope of what we're doing right now. And I mentioned to Taylor Coons, who's locally with us. She's on Hawaii Island, so representing Farm Commons. I told her that we have, a lot of backyard farmers too. So for those of you who might want to join our Facebook group, I'd encourage you you can link to it through our website as well, but it's a great resource for connecting with other farmers. So Rachel, I'll let you go ahead and introduce yourself if that's okay.
Absolutely. All right, so here we go. 5 steps to legal resilience during COVID and beyond. I'm going to emphasize that and beyond point because the nice news is that a lot of what we're going to talk about today isn't just a good idea for now, it's a good idea over the long term. And these are resources and tools that farmers and producers of all types can use to grow their skills in legal resilience really overall. So what is Farm Commons? Well, we're a nationwide organization. We serve farmers all around the country. We have 6 staff located all around the country, including Taylor in Hawaii. I'm joining you from northern Minnesota, where it's snowing. So, but what does it look like? What does our organization look like on the ground? It looks like this. Workshops. We host workshops for farmers, ranchers around the country, and we do those in connection with partner organizations like India. This is how we run our programming, and now, of course, we do it over Zoom. We have done a lot of in-person workshops, which we love, in the past 7 years. But we're busy converting those to online programming. And that will also stay with us after the pandemic ends. We think that, that there's still a lot of value in developing good online programming. We develop print guides. We have a podcast. We host regular webinars, all on the legal issues that affect farmers and how to build resilience. We also work closely with farm educators and farm organizations. We work with other ag professionals to develop custom curriculum or custom guides that work for certain types of programming they are doing. Things for beginning farmers or women farmers, things that really dig in deep on a certain issue or problem that a certain area is experiencing. We have a bunch of resources on COVID-19 if you want to browse those. And also, while you're at our website, do note that it is under redevelopment. And as of March 2021, it's going to look different. It's going to be exciting. Our mission, in a sentence, we empower farmers to understand and solve their business law issues within an ecosystem of support. So you are a key part of that. You are part of that ecosystem of support, whether you're a producer yourself, a partner, an interested individual or professional, you are part of how we resolve risk for farmers. We believe in our inherent abilities to understand these issues and move forward with them. Again, I'm the executive director of the organization. I founded it after a long, history in food and agriculture. It's really all that I've done. My family goes back farming in this part of the world, right where I grew up. That's a picture of my ancestors, not far off the boat from Norway. You can see they moved into the northern part of the state after it was logged over, which of course was after it was taken from the native people who stewarded this land for a long time. In 2012, as when I launched it, I went to law school exclusively to be able to start Farm Commons, and it was out of this need that I saw for more legal education, and more legal education that was really related to the values that farmers have themselves and their mindset for practical action that reduces risk. So that's what we do. I'm joined by Taylor. She's our coordinator, and I'll let her introduce herself, but I'll just say her title is a little weak for what she actually does for Farm Commons, and we got to change that, but I figured I'd put it up there anyways. So she's going to tell you a little bit about herself and give you the little spiel on how to use Zoom if this is your first or second or third time around with this program. So take it away, Taylor.
Hi, everyone. I'm Taylor, and I do office management, legal research, and other styles of coordination for Farm Commons. And I do it all from the Big Island. We are all remote, so I'm thankful to be able to work from home right now and still enjoy Hawaii. I'm in Volcano, if anybody's familiar with the geography of the Big Island. But I'm super excited that we're getting to do a little more programming with Hawaii. I think there's a big farming community here that a lot of people don't know about, and I think it's great that we all get to connect a little bit more now. So I'm excited. So for Zoom and for this webinar, we have two features if you're unfamiliar or if you are not. We have the chat feature and then we have the Q&A feature. So chat can be if you want to introduce yourself, say hi, that type of thing, or if there's a link you want to talk about, that type of thing. But if you have a question for Rachel or for I, or even for India, please put it in the Q&A feature. And then throughout and at the end, we can get to those questions as we can throughout the process. And then we can see if we can answer what you're looking for. But for me, thanks for coming. All right, back to you, Rachel.
Yeah, don't hesitate to ask those questions. I love hearing what you're thinking as we go. And if I see some action there, I'll pause and ask Taylor to help me move through those questions. So don't be shy. Taylor's also got some links she'll plug in there, so feel free to follow those and explore as we go along. Taylor also left out that she has a law degree. There are a lot of interesting ways that a person can participate in the legal community, and that's a lot of fun for Farm Commons to be able to capture in our little net people that connect to the law in different ways, different kinds of background, educational experiences. So it's a good time. Okay, there's one thing I want to convince you of right away. Farm law education, which you're doing today, can reduce risk, build stronger communities, and create joy. Yes, joy. Not something that you would think you were going to experience attending a webinar on the law. Shouldn't this be a lot of boring rules? Shouldn't this be just, such drudgery? It is some of that. Some of that is part of the show today, but I want to assure you that we have a lot to gain from paying attention to these things. Reducing risk itself is of course good. We want stronger farms. But a lot of what we will talk about is about our relationships. It's about talking with other business people in our community, talking with each other, talking with relatives and family about issues, talking with our employees. That dialogue builds stronger communities. That makes us stronger as well. And when we dig into those relationships and when we think deeply about what we want as producers and as community members, joy is really what follows. That really is what creates the belonging, the identity, and that sense of values. And people don't farm for the money. We're not making it making it big here, getting rich. We have to do this because it means something to us. And I want to assure you that learning about the law is part of that process. It is part of finding that joy and experiencing your value and your meaning as a producer or as part of an agricultural community. Oh, that's really good. And we feel great now, right? Well, the bummer part is that the research tells me that's not going to motivate you. The research tells me that you're actually going to listen to me more closely if I scare the bejeebus out of you. And it is October and it's Halloween. And so, well, I should work the fear angle, shouldn't I? Okay. Fear it is. We're going to lead with problems. For my 5 steps, the first thing I'm going to do is tell you all the terrible things that could happen. Then, now that you are afraid and you are sufficiently motivated, I will outline the solutions. Don't worry, I'm not going to give you any problems that don't have solutions. They all have something that we can do. So stick around for it. Okay, problem number 1. What's the most obvious bad thing that can happen to you in the time of a global pandemic? Well, number 1, you get sick with coronavirus. That would be really bad. It's pretty bad for all the obvious reasons, but it's also a legal problem. Why? Well, number 1, if you get sick, that could mean as an agricultural producer that you can't work. You yourself are stuck in bed. God forbid you're in the hospital or something like that happens. Your family is sick, your children, you have to care for them. All kinds of things can happen. This can mean that you can't bring in revenue. Therein comes your more deeper legal problems as well. If you are not able to bring in revenue because you're not able to get the product and get it to your buyers, and your income is dropping, there could be a cascade of problems. I don't need to, share that with you. The farming community around the country is responding to this risk in a lot of different ways. I know plenty of farmers that have decided to stop attending the farmers market. They're worried because even if the farmers market is running, that increases their exposure to getting sick, and that selling a few more heads of cabbage today risks their ability to bring in the squash crop tomorrow. And so they're deciding to pull back on some of those market channels because of that risk. So this is real. We have to pay attention to this. Normally when we think of getting sick, we think health insurance. Well, that's great, but we know health insurance does not cover for lost income. At this point, unemployment insurance really isn't going to do a lot for us either. Now that the $600 a week benefit from the federal government is gone and doesn't seem to be, getting replenished here real fast, there's a real problem in terms of preserving revenue. If you aren't familiar with unemployment insurance for farmers, during the pandemic, farmers themselves and other small business owners were allowed to access the unemployment insurance system up to July 31st. So that has ended now. So what can you do? What are some risk management options to protect yourself if you get sick? These are relevant in the time of COVID. They're also relevant for all manner of ways that you could get sick, threaten the revenue stream of your business, and have some legal issues. Of course, disability insurance, may know by the acronym TDI. In Hawaii, this is available through your employer. Of course, many of you farmers are not employed off the farm, so you can also purchase a disability insurance through the private market. So this is an option. Disability insurance is designed for these sorts of situations. It's designed to protect you if you are unable to bring in revenue because you are sick. So if you may work an off-farm job and have some access to TDI there, or you might be able to buy it privately. Of course, you have to look at the fine print. These policies are great and they can be really useful, but before you depend on this, take a look at the terms. Is there a waiting/exclusion period? There is almost always a waiting/exclusion period. It's usually for a short-term disability policy, it's somewhere around a week. So for a week, if you're laid up with COVID, you're going to miss out on the income that you would have brought in during that time. But beyond that, then the benefits will kick in. The benefit is usually somewhere around 60% or so of your wages slash self earnings from employment. Now that can go up or down. Of course, if you're paying more for the policy, you might go as high as 70% of your wages in a benefit, or downwards into the 50% direction too. So look for those things. What's the exclusion period? What is the benefit? Make sure that your earnings from self-employment are protected under a policy like this, that's what you're buying, if that's what you want. What documentation are they expecting for earnings from self-employment? Farmers in particular have to ask about that. What kind of documentation do they want? You might be reporting income on a Schedule F. You might not be, giving wages to yourself in another way. Make sure that they're going to accept that. Make sure it covers COVID. I mean, pretty much all of them are right now. It's sickness. COVID is a sickness, but it never hurts to ask. And then check into what does unable to work mean? Because these policies are there for you if you're unable to work. So does that mean on a ventilator? Does that mean you might infect someone else, so you're choosing not to go? So get those answers. It usually means medically unable to work. You're going to exacerbate the illness if you get out there and perform the labor. So think about short-term disability as an option to protect your wages. But maybe that's not the right option for you. It could be too expensive. It often is. Another thing you can look at is workers' compensation insurance. For the most part, if you're the business owner, you don't have to, not for the most part, you don't have to cover yourself as a business owner in Hawaii under workers' compensation. But you can elect coverage for yourself. Many business owners never consider that option. They think, why would I do that? I have health insurance. Good point. Good point. You're on the right track. You probably do have health insurance. But workers' compensation can be a better deal in some situations. Workers' compensation can provide more in terms of lost wages. Your health insurance doesn't do that. It can also do things like provide mileage to doctor visits. It can provide, a benefit if you become disabled from this illness, which does seem to be happening for some folks who get COVID, or there's a long-term disability aspect of it. The catch for workers' compensation is that it's only going to cover you if you contract coronavirus in the course of your work. So by going to the farmer's market or something like that, or from an employee who comes to work for you. So that's a little bit of a tricky kind of thing because you might not know where you got it. You may have some hoops to jump through to prove that. So I want to put this out there as a good cost benefit analysis for you to perform. Think about whether workers' comp is right for you. Beyond the time of COVID, bear this in mind because, how do farmers get injured? Usually while farming. It is very possible you'll fall off your own porch, while having a lemonade at the end of the day. But it's more likely probably that an implement or some sort of, accident during work is going to cause the damage. So we've covered short-term and long-term disability insurance, and then workers' compensation. Those are good options for you to think about to protect your revenue streams if you get COVID. Risk number 2, what other terrible things can happen? Well, number 2, your farm may have suffered from a significant price decline for your product. COVID has been pretty disruptive to supply chains. It has ruined demand for certain products. It has caused problems with shipping, with manufacturing. You know the drill. This is old news now, 6-month-old news. There are programs that can help. Right now, I want to talk about the CFAP program. So Coronavirus Food Assistance Program, which doesn't necessarily make a lot of sense, but the program we're going to address right now. Right now, I'm going to be telling you about what is called CFAP 2. CFAP 2 is different than CFAP 1. If you heard about CFAP this summer, you got to move on mentally. That was an old program. Now we're talking about a new program, which is better. It is better and more beneficial for folks like yourself that are probably doing alternative type products. I mean, especially in Hawaii, a lot of the products that you grow there were left out of CFAP 1, but have been included in CFAP 2. What is this? This is cash payments. This is a check from the government. So that's good. I hope that, gets your interest. And it is to compensate you for losses that you may have experienced between April 1 and August 31st. So this is for losses that you experienced right as COVID hit and then over the summer. However, it is not for losses that you are still incurring. So that does have to be in the past. How much you're going to get? That's always a very important question, because there's paperwork involved. You don't want to go through all this paperwork if the check isn't going to be worth it at the end. Well, the bad news is that the payment formula varies by crop. So you're going to have to look up the crops that you produce and see what the payment formula is. We have a link there. It is pretty easy just to pick from the drop-down menu and take a look at the formula. I'll give you an example right away. So let's say Farmer Jill grew $20,000 of ginger in 2019. Now, let's say that she moves through the CPAP program. She gets a check. She gets a check for 10.6% of last year's sales volume. So that's $2,120. That's not bad. 10.6%, that could be worth it to a lot of folks. So take a look at the link, see which products you produce and what the formula is. If it's looking like it might be worth it to you, what do you do? Well, actually, wait, before we get to the what do you do, a few more things that you'll want to know. So my example there with Farmer Jill, that's a revenue-based payment. It's based on what did Jill make last year producing ginger. That's great, because she might be selling ginger at the farmer's market or selling ginger to restaurants who are willing to pay a premium price as compared to something that, comes in from an Asian country or is not farm identified. That revenue-based payment is going to work for those of you who produce specialty crops, floriculture, nursery crops, aquaculture crops. Now, if you produce a major commodity, beef, poultry, eggs, dairy, it doesn't matter what you make for your product. There you get a payment based on a certain percentage, which is derived from the decline in national wholesale prices over that time period. So whether you're based in Hawaii or Indiana, they're using the same formula for the decline in prices for poultry over that time period, and it's all an average. That might work for you. Some folks are getting a larger payment than their actual price decline was because it's a national average. The only way to know is to go look it up for what you produce. Minor commodities are receiving a flat rate payment of $15 per acre. These are your folks that are growing, barley, sorghum and other small grains that really don't have a national wholesale price average. If that's you get lumped into this minor category thing, and it's like, would you like $15 an acre? Again, that's nice because you don't have to show an actual decline in the payment that you received, but $15 an acre might not be nearly enough for what you are growing. So go check out your products and do a little estimation for yourself of if you think it's going to be worthwhile. The good news is the process is not terribly onerous. We haven't heard very bad things about applying. You apply through your local FSA office. For anyone who's not familiar, FSA is Farm Service Agency. Farm Service Agency is a part of USDA, the United States Department of Agriculture. They have offices nationwide in every county. They are here exclusively to serve farmers and facilitate access to government programs. If you haven't worked with FSA in the past, it's probably a good idea to get that conversation going sooner rather than later. You may need something called a farm number. If you've never worked with FSA before, you probably don't have a farm number, so you can get in their system so that they know who you are. If you have worked with FSA, you may already have a contact at your local office who knows you and you have some sort of relationship with them. That's perfect. You can give them a call and say, hey, I'm looking at CFAP and I think I'm going to apply. Sound good? Are we on track? And they can help you get that process going. Okay, confirm your eligibility before you get too far. Eligibility hinges on ownership risk and production risk. So if you don't have any ownership of the product that you're growing, that actually will be a problem for participation in this program. Most farmers do own the product that they grow, but sometimes they don't. It's common, let's say, in the poultry production industry to not actually own the chicken that you're growing. You might produce it under contract to Tyson. Tyson owns the bird. You are merely the steward of the bird's life while it is alive. If that is your situation, you may not be eligible for this program. Same if you don't have any production risk. If you don't stand to make any more or less based on the actual production of that crop or livestock, then you may not be eligible. And that's for obvious reasons. You're not suffering from that price decline. So as long as you have ownership risk and production risk, you are more than likely eligible. So put in that call to FSA and get that ball rolling. The forms are online. You can take a quick look and see what's going to be expected of you. Do note that you're not submitting proof at this time. You don't have to upload records of sales volumes for revenue payment. You don't have to submit, acreage or any of those sorts of things. You have to have that proof. You have to be prepared to submit it if you are asked to provide that documentation, but it's not part of the package itself, of the application package. So that tends to make things easier for folks. You have a little while. You have until December 11 to take advantage of CPAP 2. There's an FAQ online from USDA, which is fairly thorough. And since this is CPAP 2, you've had the benefit of people running through CPAP 1 and coming up with good questions for that FAQ. So take a look at those things, see if it's right for you. If you run into problems, if you feel like you are not getting help from FSA that you need, don't hesitate to reach out. We'll see if we can provide you at Farm Commons with some direction to help you move forward with this program. If it's your first time working with a government benefit program, there can, maybe there's a learning curve, so don't hesitate to reach out to us. Problem number 3. Your employees get sick. Practical problem, of course. Who is going to help you get the job done? Ag labor is pretty scarce. So that can be a real problem for your productivity and for your profitability. Keeping folks safe is, of course, good risk management from that perspective. But I also need you to know that there is some legal risk towards your employees getting sick. There's a potential for you to end up responsible for that. A solution is, of course, workers' compensation. Workers' compensation gives your employees a source of funds if they get sick in the course of work. So that can help them pay for their medical bills, yes, but also cover for lost income, mileage to doctor visits, those sorts of things that we talked about. A thing that a lot of people don't realize about workers' comp, though, is that it protects you as the employer. Workers' comp is there for you. It's not just something that you have to buy, that the state of Hawaii makes you buy. They give you some benefits. Employees who have workers' comp available to them cannot sue you for injuries that they receive in the course of their job. So before workers' comp, really the problem on the part of business owners is that they were getting sued left and right by employees who got injured. This is your garden variety slip and fall. Hey, my employee hit me with a rake. All kinds of ways that you can get hurt, including catching COVID from a fellow employee or from a customer or any other thing that happens in the course of business. So this is something that you should be buying already. It's already mandatory for farmers and on Hawaii to provide workers' comp. However, there's a chance that you're not doing it because you don't know about it. If that's you, then the thing to note is that you're potentially at risk of penalties for not doing that. And if someone gets sick, they can sue you. So it's pretty much a double penalty. If this is a mistake that you're making. It's a really good one to prioritize to fix, particularly because farming is risky and the chance of them getting injured and then finding out that there should have been workers' comp there, it's a risk. So definitely think about trying to address that one if you think it relates to you. If you happen to manage a nonprofit farm, now you might have a loophole there because nonprofit farms don't have to cover unpaid workers. Like you may have volunteers who come in to help with a farmer's market stand or help with production because they like the work and they find value in it. It's certainly something we see around the country. Those unpaid workers can sue you if they get injured or if they get COVID. And you can actually cover them under workers' comp, even though they are unpaid. The benefit to you is, of course, preventing those lawsuits. So think about that. If you do run a nonprofit, think about whether the cost of workers' comp is actually of a good value for that peace of mind. If your employees get sick, you do at present time need to offer paid sick leave. So if your workers get COVID or care for a family member who has COVID, they are by federal law right now owed 2 weeks of paid leave at 100% of their regular pay, assuming they can't telework. Because who can telework farming? Maybe this is someone who does marketing for you or puts in calls to your buyers, but assuming they're actually doing production tasks, they're probably not teleworking. So this is federal. This is in effect until the end of the year. I have no idea what will happen as 2021 rolls around. But for now, something you need to keep in mind. And this is going to supersede Hawaii's sick leave rules because it is more stringent at this time. Now, what if your employees are not sick, but their daycare or their school is shut down because of COVID? They can't send their kids to school and they can't get care for them. And so they have to stay home to watch their children. They are actually owed up to 12 weeks of leave at present time as well. And 10 of those weeks have to be at 2/3 their regular pay. Again, assuming that they cannot telework. So this is potentially more of a problem because it's a longer time period. That can have a significant impact on the bottom line of a farm. And presumably, if you've got one person who's out of work because of COVID, you may have more who are coming. So this can be a problem. There is good news. The good news is that you can get an advance from the IRS to pay this leave time. You can get an advance if you need it. And if you don't need the advance, you can take the credit after the fact. You can take a credit against your payroll taxes for all of the paid leave that you offered to your employees. So at the end of the day, it actually should not impact your bottom line to extend this paid sick time. Now, you still have to do the time and effort to fill out that paperwork and communicate with the IRS and manage that process. But discounting your time to complete that paperwork, you should come out clean in the end. And it is always really nice when people have paid sick time to care for themselves and their children and family. If you want to do any additional research on this, this is a complex topic, and I am covering the bare fundamentals that you need to know to manage risk. This is called the Families First Coronavirus Response Act. We do have a more detailed webinar at our website for you to paw through if you want. It'll go into exceptions. And of course, there are some narrow exceptions if you really can't provide this leave. So if that's concerning to you, there's more you can dive into and get better answers at our website. If you don't have workers' comp for some reason and you are exposed to a lawsuit from your employees because they contract COVID, I have a solution. Follow the standards. Following conventional standards for keeping employees safe will protect you from a lawsuit if your employee gets sick. Potentially, they could come after you and say, you were negligent, you negligently exposed me to this virus, I'm going to sue you. Well, they'll lose on that case if you weren't negligent, which would mean you followed standards. This can be a straightforward common sense analysis. Are you exposing people to risk unnecessarily? Well, You should probably be screening for illness. You should probably be asking your employees when they show up for the day, do you have a fever? Do we have any new coughs going on? Think about whether you can group your employees into cohorts so that not everybody is exposed to everybody. Maybe just this team works together and just that team works together. Make PPE available, your masks, your gloves. Encourage that use, not just setting it on a table and walking away or driving into the back field and not bringing it with you. Make sure it is available and people are encouraged to use it. And of course, hand washing and sanitization. Pretty straightforward, common sense stuff. If you're the kind of person that loves a checklist and, common sense feels a little too squishy, we have a resource. Check the CDC's checklist for agricultural risk assessment and control planning. Boy, that is exactly what it's called. And it reads like a document with that kind of a title. It is pages long and it uses a lot of words to say things like make PPE available. But you check that out because you're not going to find anything better for a risk assessment and control planning scenario. You can tell I'm kind of a strange style of attorney where I actually don't love rules and lots of words. But they are necessary sometimes. And some people really do like lots of words and rules. Problem number 4. Now we've moved through a lot of people getting sick. You've gotten sick. Your employees have gotten sick. Their kids have gotten sick. Oh no, now your customers have gotten sick. I have good news. You're probably not liable. That's just, the easiest way to explain it. Don't worry about this problem. I wanted to put it out there because it's something you might be thinking about. Hey, am I going to get in trouble if I am unaware that I have COVID and someone thinks they got it from me, whether or not they can prove it, or they get it from one of my employees? At least when it comes to your customers, your clients, your business contacts, you are probably not liable. They're going to have a very hard time establishing that it came from you and establishing that you were negligent for it. It is easier in the employee realm to show that you were negligent if you didn't follow those standards than it is in the customer realm. So don't worry so much about this one. It's not what should keep you up at night. But think about talking to your insurance agent anyways. When it comes to liability for your customers, your clients, and your business contacts, that's something your insurance agent is there for you to help you manage those risks. Particularly if you switch to new markets or expanded your presence in significant markets, now is the time to talk to your insurance agent about your liability overall. So let's say you launched a CSA program during this time. Maybe, your restaurant sales died or farmers market attendance was really low. So you did a direct to consumer program. You should really talk to your insurance agent right about now if you haven't already. You're experiencing different risks selling directly to consumers. The types of product contamination that could occur, the types of things that could fall in the boxes or the bag of lettuce, screws and nails and things like that hurt people. The food safety vectors could be a little bit different, salmonella and those sorts of bugs and pathogens. If you do a CSA, you're delivering that product maybe to a central drop point, and maybe people are coming to pick up their box and they're tripping off porches and over rocks, or they're coming to your farm for socially distanced masked events. Again, they're crashing into things and hurting themselves. You need insurance. If you did not sell direct to consumer before, you probably don't have coverage for all of those things. So call up your insurance agent and say, hey, I have a CSA program. I want to review my exposure to liability here and talk about what we can do to fix that. Anytime I recommend talking to insurance agents, people see dollar signs, justifiably, like, oh no, they're just going to charge me for more stuff. Yes, sort of. Hopefully what's going to happen in this case is they're just going to switch. They're going to switch your classification away from a wholesale provider to a retail provider. That's not necessarily going to be more expensive. It's just getting you in the right box to cover the right risks. there is a chance that, the rate would go up, but it might go down. And the bottom line is you don't want to buy insurance that doesn't cover you for the risks you're actually experiencing. So if you're putting money down on insurance anyways, let's make sure it's a product that works for you. So put that call out there and see where you can go with liability coverage. And you can always say, hey, am I covered if my customers get COVID or if I end up giving it to a business supplier? It's worth asking. And sometimes you learn really interesting things when you keep asking questions of your insurance agent. I alluded earlier to the relationship-based aspects of risk management. This is one of those. When we manage legal risk in America, in terms of liability, we manage it with insurance. It's really about, did you pay the right people to defend you when that claim goes forward? These lawsuits are retrospective. The law doesn't tell you what you have to do to not be liable for a slip and fall injury. They just look at what did happen and decide if that's what you should have done after the fact. So it's really hard to manage liability-based risks through your actions. You really have to manage it by getting insurance so that someone is there to defend you and to look at what happened in the past and frame it in the right way for the court so that you're likely to win the case. Where does the joy come in here? The joy comes in building that relationship with your insurance agent. If your insurance agent is someone you don't really like talking to, time to call around to your farming peers and see if they're working with somebody that they really like. This relationship is extremely important to the long-term resilience of your business from a legal perspective. They should be coming out to your farm. They should be looking at what you're doing, asking questions. Now, to most farmers, it's like, what? No, I don't want them coming out. I don't want them, seeing, my outbuildings. But you do, because they may have really good suggestions for you, like, hey, this thing is really going to be expensive for you if we cover this. So let's not cover that. That dialogue can be really important to you over the long term to learn, why is insurance expensive? Are there particularly risky things that you're doing? So work with someone that you can have that kind of relationship with, that you can look forward to talking with them. People often ask us at Farm Commons if we have any referrals. We don't recommend any specific insurance companies. Instead, we recommend asking your peers. It isn't so much about the company so much as that agent or the broker. If you work with an insurance broker, they're going to be able to sell you policies from a wide range of companies, some of whom are really good for this type of agriculture, or that one, or good for direct to consumer, or good for wholesale. So focusing on who's, referrals from right inside your community is really the place to start. That's where your partner organizations are also really helpful. You can call them and say, hey, can we put this on your Facebook page? Can we ask if anybody knows of anyone who's great in this area? So work your local networks and connections to find someone. My last problem. This is a related problem. And I wanted to phrase it generally because I have a number of general things that we should do to manage this risk. Building on that example of starting a CSA, you probably changed or expanded market channels fairly quickly back when COVID hit. Things got weird really fast. We were all scrambling to figure out what to do next. Maybe now's the time to catch up with some of the legal changes that impacted you, which you may or may not have had time to think about. Are you doing home delivery? If you are, check into your auto insurance, especially if you're having employees do driving. If you weren't doing delivery before, you're going to have to tell your auto insurance agent, hey, I'm driving for business. I'm driving in this way. I'm going these places. You may not have coverage for an accident that occurs. Also note that doing home delivery is generally not considered agricultural labor. That has big impacts. Right now, many of you farmers and agriculturalists are not required to pay the minimum wage. That changes. once your workers are doing non-agricultural labor. You may not be paying into unemployment insurance. You might not be paying overtime. If you are not doing those things, that changes when you start doing home delivery. You have to do minimum wage, overtime, and unemployment insurance because it's not agricultural labor. Even though you are still a farm, it's dependent on the type of work that your employee is doing. Same thing goes to selling directly to consumers, whereas you weren't doing that before, or if you're combining product with other farmers. Like, let's say you're still doing something, you're still moving wholesale to grocers or suppliers, but you've started moving your neighbor's product, or you've started a food hub style collection to make things efficient on yourselves. Not agricultural labor. So you want to pay at least the minimum wage, pay overtime for all hours worked over 40, pay into unemployment insurance. And then you want to check on land use regulations. You may be zoned agricultural. You may be under a conservation easement or another form of private land use regulation that limits what you can do. Usually what happens here is your farm might be protected under zoning or a conservation easement, and you're allowed to do agriculture because you're doing it now. People like that. But then if you stop doing agricultural things, like combining your product with other farmers' products, having events, having people onto the property, all of a sudden you might be violating your zoning code, violating that conservation easement, and that can create problems for you over the long term. So the first thing is to figure out if you're in that situation. Does the fact that you've transitioned into things that aren't considered agriculture, has that created any problems? Read your zoning code. Sometimes that is not a fun idea, but hey, it's an investment. It's an investment in some really important knowledge that affects your relationship to that land over the long term. Maybe it's something you can do with your neighbors or somebody who's active in local government that you know that might be able to help you dive into that zoning code and see what it says. Same with a conservation easement or a lease. All you need is a copy of it and then to wade through the language. Brew yourself a pot of coffee. Get comfortable. Okay. Are you creating a new business with another farmer at this time? If this is a way that you've been managing legal risk during COVID, consider a partnership agreement that outlines your relationship. Maybe you have started working with somebody who's newly unemployed, maybe a relative or a friend. Now is a good time to sit back and talk about how you want that to work over the long term. Did anyone invest money in this business? Did anyone put up money, say, for a vehicle or production capacity or equipment? Did they get credit for that investment? What happens if this is not the right business for you both over the long term? How do you get out? And don't think you get to skip that question if you happen to be in, say, spousal relationship with this person. Sometimes even spouses want to get out of an agricultural venture, and it doesn't have to mean divorce, especially if you talk about it beforehand. Don't shy away from that question, especially if you are related to that person. How are we compensating ourselves for our labor and the expertise that we bring to the table? This is where we can see resentment develop over time. This is where family members start to not come to Thanksgiving anymore because we didn't talk about these things. So sometimes it's nice to have this conversation after you feel like a business has some traction. Like, hey, this is working. Maybe we will make some money. Okay, now's the time for some groundwork that will help you be successful over the long term. It can get harder to ask these questions after you've been doing it for a few years, after you've built up habits and expectations. So now, you might be a good 3 to 6 months in. Think about these questions. At Farm Commons, we have the Farmer's Guide to Business Structures, 300 delightful pages on what you need to think about when you are starting a business. And for anyone who's new on the line and is just starting a farm fresh, definitely take a look at that guide for all you need to know about LLCs and that sort of documentation. Okay, on to my conclusion. Sometimes folks feel a little overwhelmed at this point. They feel like, oh man, that's a lot of things that I could be doing, and I don't have an extra week in which to do it. How do you prioritize? How do you get some forward momentum and build your confidence? Think about which is the most risky. Risk has two components. How likely is this terrible thing to occur? How bad will it be if this terrible thing does occur? For whichever action point is highest on those two mechanisms, we'll do that one first. Start there. Start addressing the things that are most likely to happen and are going to be the worst. My personal opinion is that if you're not buying workers' compensation on your employees, that is definitely your highest risk. Now, if you are, you can pat yourself on the back and say, look, I've already done the biggest thing that I need to do. I'm on track. So awesome. Now you get to move to risks that are lower down on that risk. So that's what I have got for you today. Oops, I forgot my last slide that usually says, does anyone have any questions? So we will stop here. How are things going in the chat box or questions, Taylor?
So far, no questions, but people are saying, oh, where'd it go? Let's see. Saying good information on the CFAP2 program and where to find a local FSA office to go to for that. If anyone has questions for that, someone put the
Awesome.
link in for that, so that was nice.
Terrific.
But yeah.
All right. Yeah, don't forget to go to farmcommons.org, browse what we've got on COVID and on our standard materials. We do a lot of work on business structures, leasing, food safety, lots of things we didn't talk about today too.
Oh, Indy, I think you're muted.
I'm going to go ahead and launch the second poll. If you guys don't mind filling it out, it just kind of helps us know who attended today, how you identify ag professional, farmer, rancher, and then your interest and knowledge of risk management. As I'd mentioned, we do have a risk management tool for our Women Farmers Network, and it focuses a little bit on production and then some on legal and financial risk. We've used a lot of help from Farm Commons, and we'd like to work more closely with you. Ours is largely linked to an agribusiness guide that we did and have just recently updated, and we've got partners on that, particularly Go Farm. And but yeah, so our website is oahurcd.org. So maybe I'll put that in the chat. And yeah, thank you so much. It's nice to have these partnerships because we can't do it all. You guys, this is so informative. And it was just nice to really sit down and dig into this. So, yeah, so, and this will be recorded, and it is recorded, and it'll be offered to view again if you want to pass it on to any friends that weren't able to make it. So, thank you, Farm Commons, once again.
Thank you. Yeah, don't be strangers. Reach out.
Thank you. Okay. Thank you for all who have filled out the poll. And I think we are going to go ahead and end a little early then.
All right.
Bye, everyone.
Thanks, everybody.
Aloha.
Bye.
Bye.
Bye.